मैं हूं चेतना और डीसी न्यूज इंडिया की टीम फिलहाल मौजूद है AI4 Agri समिट में, जो कि ऑर्गेनाइज की गई है जियो वर्ल्ड कन्वेंशन सेंटर पीकेसी में। ये 2 दिवसीय इवेंट में एआई और एग्रीकल्चर से जुड़े कई महत्वपूर्ण टेक्नोलॉजी और कई महत्वपूर्ण सुविधा आपको देखने मिलेगी। एआई एंड एग्री टेक इनोवेशन सेंटर, जो कि ग्लोबली गवर्नमेंट फंडेड इंस्टीट्यूशन है, वो एआई फॉर एवरी एकड़ की टैगलाइन से फार्मर्स को मदद करेगा और इसके अलावा एआई से जुड़ी अलग अलग चीजें भी आपको देखने मिलेगी। ये एग्रीकल्चर समिट वेदर सॉल्यूशन से लेकर एग्रो मूव, रोबोटिक इंडिया, महिंद्रा एंड महिंद्रा से लेकर यहाँ पर हर एक स्टॉल जो कि एआई के क्षेत्र में और एग्रीकल्चर के क्षेत्र में अपना कंट्रीब्यूशन दे रहे हैं, ये सारी टेक्नोलॉजीज यहाँ पर उपलब्ध है। और इसके अलावा महाविस्तार, ट्रेसेक्स टेक्नोलॉजी से लेकर एआई से संबंधित सारी की सारी माहिती फार्मर्स को यहाँ देखने मिलेगी। और इसी के साथ एग्रीकल्चर में एक नया अध्याय शुरू होने जा रहा है, जो कि कृषि क्षेत्र को आधुनिक तंत्रज्ञान एआई से जोड़ेगा और इसके साथ साथ फार्मर्स को भी काफी बड़ी मदद मिलेगी।
Organization FAO and Mr. Mark D'Souza's Country Director, International Fund for Agricultural Development, to please take your seats on the dais. Gentlemen, please. Welcome to you. A very hearty welcome to you, gentlemen.
That's why I was calling to say.
I warmly welcome all of you. Yes, and the moderator. So, ladies and gentlemen, the plenary of this track brings together some of the top institutional and strategic thought leaders in agtech, finance and capital markets with an aim of seeking strategic insights and pathways to build a robust investor-friendly platform for AI in agriculture in Maharashtra and India. As India advances towards its Viksit Bharat 2047 vision, the integration of artificial intelligence into agriculture has transitioned from a technical experiment to a macroeconomic imperative, with the National Agricultural Credit Target exceeding rupees 31.5 lakh crore and ecosystem of over 3,000 agtech startups. The Indian agri-AI sector represents one of the most significant untapped frontiers for global institutional capital. This investment landscape is characterized by a lot of elements which we will now dwell upon. So without further ado, let me invite Mr. Ashok Kirnari, Director, Quality Control, Department of Agriculture, Government of Maharashtra, to kindly welcome and felicitate all the experts seated on the dais, beginning with our moderator, Mr. M. Ramakrishnan, Managing Director, Partner CII. Firstly, the traditional Indian shawl, followed by this flower basket of the golden champa, safa and mogra jasmine flowers, which is initiated by the Department of Agriculture, Government And now Dr. Shaji Krishna, Chairman of NABARD, sir, please accept this as a token of respect, appreciation and gratitude. If you could come little, yes, in front. Mr. Santosh Vasudevan, Global Lead for Digital Agri and AgTech IFC. Mr. Takayuki Hagiwara, representative in India of the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO. And Mr. Mark D'Souza Shields, Country Director, International Fund for Agricultural Development. Thank you, Mr. Kinnerly. And with that, I hand over charge of the session to the moderator, Mr. M. Ramakrishnan, Managing Director, Private Partners. All yours, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In a morning session, one of my colleagues was talking about how in certain cases agriculture or farmer activities is taken as a separate department, because financing as a separate stream, so to say. And he said it's unnatural and not practical, so to say. I think for most of the people in this room, or most of the people who are associated with agriculture, you would agree that finance is like a core integral piece of the overall process, the business, the ecosystem, whatever you want to call it. If you look at the Indian agriculture ecosystem, more than 31 lakh crores of credit goes through the farms, goes through the process every year. And if you look at AI, Maharashtra AI policy is a great example of saying the basic technology already exists. A lot of startups have been tried, have been funded, quite a few of them have scaled, but many of them are still in the trial basis. So the purpose of today's conversation is to get a sense of when there are serious investors available to support the ecosystem, what's lacking, what needs to be put in place, what will help the overall system, the process, the farming as a business, as a overall ecosystem kind of improve. That's what we're going to be discussing today. Let's start with Mark. So, Mark, before we jump into the financing, I'd love to hear from you. What would an inclusive capital stack look like? Speaking about women farmers, so maybe you want to start with that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, we have to understand that. So first of all, we have to understand that AI is not unlike, despite the fact that it's very innovative and brand new, it's not like any other class of new product. And there's a product development curve with an associated capital structure that goes along with it. And you have to be purposely inclusive to ensure that people, like the 80% of smallholder farmers in India, will have a chance to get financing or to be able to participate in these new products and services. So at the beginning of the product curve, you see many, many small innovative companies, and then you see as the products become more and more developed, you see fewer smaller companies, you see some large companies jumping in, and then by the end of the product development cycle, you see about 80% of the market is controlled by large companies and 20% by niche companies. And along that scale, or along that curve rather, you see different kinds of financing, and this is very inclusive. I mean, very important to remain purposely inclusive. So at the beginning, you have to be able to take losses as a public sector investor. You have to be able to figure out ways in which you can support those companies that are also working not just for profitability, but for public good as well. And there's many, many years of experience in this field. This is the seed capital, the venture capital, moving into equity capital. And each along those lines, you have to figure out ways in which you can leverage in private sector investment for good, public good. In this case, being able to have products and services that really get to the last mile, get to the smallholders, get to the disadvantaged, get the people that face barriers in the market, women, youth, disabled, indigenous communities. So this is very important. And at that stage, you can see grants being very important, but you see grants that are purposely levering in private sector capital. And then once that happens, you can move to more sophisticated means like blended finance. So for example, a good blended finance should take place maybe with a public development bank, like NEBR, coming in with lower risk, with higher risk tolerance, and that allows a first loss provision, for example, or some kind of guarantee fund. And these are very important. Why? Because in the absence of these, kinds of catalytic supports, the companies that are looking to maximize public good and to maximize profits are at a disadvantage in the capital markets, not because their products are necessarily no good, but often just because there's a perception that they're more risky. And this is doubled when you're in the agricultural sector. It's perceived as a very difficult sector to work in, a high-risk sector. And so along that product curve, you can see really a capital structure that goes along with it. I'll just end by saying one of the things that we found to be very, very useful and very effective is our challenge funds. So the challenge fund idea allows companies to say, we want to do this, we know that there's a market need, and we'll do this. And challenge funds often provide grants for ideation, then for piloting, and then for scaling commercialization. And I just want to say at the very, very end, if there's no market, if the farmers don't want a particular product or service, there's no market. So that's the first order of the business, is make sure that the product that AI is producing will be of use, put money in the farmer's pocket.
Funds, because that's what Partner CII policy has at its core, to fund these startups either at a pilot stage or an idea stage or at a stage services. So we're looking forward to those projects getting rolled out. Shaji, spoke about the small group purpose. We know that the cooperative movement is like a precursor to the FPO movement. And before we get into AI in agriculture, basic digitization of all these different individuals across different groups is very critical. And you are seeing it up close and personal with the whole digitization of packs across different layers. How is that moving? What do you see on the ground, and how can that data eventually help AI-based interventions?
So thank you. As you said, we are in the process of digitizing many of the rural financial institutions, and we believe that without digitizing, we can't deliver the credit in the manner which they want at the cost of affordability of that. And then there's a trust deficit. For credit to be delivered, credit is basically investment trust, where the trust is actually built through that information asymmetry which is there, and it's very important for the credit to be delivered on time. So on that context, we feel that digitization of the institutions at the cutting edge level, like the cooperatives. Cooperatives historically in India, more than 120 years, predates independence. It came as a response to crisis in the rural sector, but they failed to reform. One thing is that they didn't have the inherent capacity to reform by itself. So somebody has to tell them, and somebody has to deliver them schemes and processes for them to get digitized. So in that context, we started the digitization process at the behest of the government of India. Of course, it is as a grant we are giving, and then NABARD is the implementator. For this implementation is done by NABARD. But But then cooperatives in India is not a federal subject, it is a state subject. So we need to onboard the state governments also into it. And luckily we have onboarded more part of the state governments into it, and they also see value in this. So now, why we do this is that we need to be aware that the data is very important, and data need to be collected in a verifiable manner, and also verified data is coming. So otherwise, what will happen is that only garbage will coming in. So that the process which we need to draft this process accurately. And as on date, we have done around 70,000 primary agriculture credit society. The digitization has been done. So that means verified data is available for any entity to come in and develop models on that. See, one of the most important precursors for any AI ML models is that the data should be there, and it should be verified data which is coming. Otherwise, whatever decisions we take out of this models may go happening. We may not be accurate, or may not be fitting into the solution which we want to provide. So on that context, now we are building the largest data warehouse for all the cooperatives, and then we need to know, so because a lot of private data is coming, so data privacy and then cyber related issues, all these things need to be ring fenced. Otherwise, there will be some, and then consent based also, because this around 14 crore farmers data coming in, and each farmer has to give his consent. So we need to structure in all those aspects as we build the data structure which we are currently implementing. So what I feel is that once we do that, complete that digitization of existing processes, then it will lead to improved governance of this, because now that data is available on a remote manner, even at the state level, when the registrars or the auditors of the cooperatives, they can have access to this in a seamless manner, and they can be sure about what they are auditing. Earlier, all these governance aspects need to be seen at the field, they need to travel to them, and there are limitations of accessing the information. But here, as they do the daily transactions, the transactions are getting captured in the digital software. So governance improvement is the most important thing we are aiming at in cooperatives, because once we do that, a farmer who is dealing with the most trusted, for the farmer, the cooperatives are considered to be the most near entities, and it needs to be a more trusted entity as well. Because farmer, if they give their hard-earned savings to the cooperative, they need to be sure that it is being governed in a proper manner. So that will ensure for proper audit purposes. And once we inculcate that transparency aspect into that, the most important other aspect is is to ring fence those risks associated with. And AI is a great decoder of risk, because AI deals with a lot of data, and it has to decode the risk in a proper manner. And once you decode that risk in a proper manner, then delivery of the credit also can be done in a very appropriate manner. If you see that the credit models across the world is more urban centric, because credit deals with collateral, credit deals with trust, and then credit deals with risk. And for all these things, we need proper data. And for all these, once we need the proper data, these AI and such aspects can come in and deliver credit at the most appropriate manner and at the appropriate time. So that is one thing. And then added to that, rural area is one sector where the climate risk is very, very much there. And climate risk is one aspect which the agriculture sector particularly, because rural is predominantly agriculture, and climate risk has materialized. But problem is that we are not recognized, most of the farmers are not capable of recognizing that. So we need to price those risks, and that is one thing. Second thing is that we need to anticipate that risk. So for that, this data which we are generating through the cooperatives will be helping us. So to summarize, what we are doing is that we are not just digitizing the processes, we are re-architecting the process. Actually, the process is getting re-architected, and with that, we believe that the farmer, that too, those who are undocumented, because in India, undocumented farmers are huge, around 25%, they are the real cultivators. And they are now left at the mercy of village money lender, or a lender who is giving the money at abnormally very high, at 25 to 30%. Actually, this cost of credit need to be reduced, and we hope with the digitization process which we are doing, and then integrating that the primary societies with the banking system, because right now cooperative societies are not proper banks. but then we need to deliver all the banking services through these entities. For that, integration with the banking system is a must. Right in recent pieces, this integration is happening, but now we will be doing it in a structured manner so that the model, the credit model, which and the payment and financial services model, which is going to get evolved, will be a proper one fitted to the needs of the farmer. And that's what we are aiming at.
Wonderful. You spoke about trust and you spoke about AI being the decoder of this. For many people, the core model of AI with so much of data being consumed itself has to do a lot of risk. And that I want to what are the basic safeguards to be had put in place when you're looking at a large system of AI and then looking at UPI, digital public infrastructure around AI? Yesterday there was this announcement about data exchange. So how do you put that in?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Partner from FAO representative. And first of all, I congratulate the government of India and the state of the Maharashtra to have this fantastic data platform and AI platform. The question is the safeguards and API. I have a couple of the points, and which I think that the government of India has already taken, and then I'm probably repeating what I'm saying. They're repeating what the government of India is already implementing. But I'd like to emphasize a couple of the points. The first is the language. India is not just one India. India is a diverse country. And then you have the 22, if I'm not mistaken, official language. And then if people calling from Orissa, for example, and then the machine respond English or Hindi, and the farmer will be shy away from it immediately. So the language is very important, and then this is being taken care of the government of India. But if the machine say, press 1 for English, press 2 Hindi, press 3 for the Gujarati, it doesn't work that way because you have the 22 language. So the important thing is the telephone number is geotagged and the computer recognizes and where this person is coming from. Then the farmer will understand immediately, or the computer recognize it and respond to the farmer's language. That way the machine or the information is properly communicated to the farmers. So that is the one very important point. The second is the barriers. There's still the people using the future phones. And then if you generate that information in a way that the farmer cannot understand or get the information through the smartphone type of the information, that farmers will not be able to use it. So this is very important point that the usability, and this is the government is already taking care of. The third one is the machine learning. You see, there is global practices, state practices, and then many of the useful practices out there. But how are we going to ensure that a farmer that this is the right information for the farmers? For example, if you give a long academic answer to the farmers, they may not be able to understand. So they are very important that they are short, then guide them if they want to understand the further, then that you need to guide different type of the information. So it's very important the geotag, and then information is the user-friendly, understandable for the farmers. So these are the machine learning is very important. And lastly, all the information is being updated. And then somebody has to verify the AI-generated information. Everybody, probably when you use an AI, you experience the hallucinations. Sometimes you feel that, oh, information I got from ChatGPT or this AI may not be relevant. I'm sure that you have that experience. Farmer may also have that sort of experiences. Somebody has to verify those information. Otherwise, if you give it a recommendation to the farmers, if the farmer practice wrong things on the ground, the farmer will lose the yield. Who is going to guarantee the loss of the farmers, those yield? So somebody really has to examine what is being told. So this is where the role of the scientist, role of the ICAR, role of the KBK is very important. So this sort of machine learning has to be constantly being taken care of. And those points. Thank you very much.
There's actually a discussion point going on this, whether this discussion should happen in English or a combination of Spanish and Japanese and Malayalam and whatnot. Luckily, we decided to stick to English, Santosh, would you like to reflect on the role of World Bank and IFC in pushing technologies, especially AI in agri at scale? How are you pushing?
So, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be back in my hometown, so I'm happy to be here. So in terms of digital technologies, including AI, this is at the core of AgriConnect, a program that we launched last year at the annual meetings of the World Bank. So where we are hoping to move smallholder farmers from subsistence to surpluses. So we believe digital and AI systems are critical because they are the only practical way to move volumes of data, take decisions, and transactions between billions of farmers. From the World Bank perspective, we invest in three different things, three different pillars, if you will. One is investing in DBI and data. Shaji has spoken about it. We've spoken about guardrails. And when we talk about DBI, I think that is the essence of how we do this. And I'm going to tie this to the agri-tech that you referred to. A good number of startups that we talk to, at least what we've seen in our experience across the globe, they are basically spending 80% of their time collecting data that is available but in different buckets, and then 20% of the time into developing products and services. If this digital infrastructure was available as an open network, was available freely, exchangeable, you then have the ability to say the go-to-market, the product market fit for a startup to focus on, that part is reduced. And that's where IFC and the World Bank come together to play a role. The second part of what World Bank does is to say we are basically supporting innovation. And lastly, we are supporting capacity building at the ground level with various initiatives that we have in several countries. And we're trying to scale this up. We have invested in over 60 countries, almost $2 billion in projects across digital agri, data, and trying to build the information support system. Because at the end of the day, you can use all of this data to decide what extension services you can provide, what advisory services you can provide, and how you can create localized innovations. So we also need to start thinking about sandbox for innovators to come in and say, come and develop something that is contextual. We talk about AI in terms of the large language models. But I think when you look at India, it's a continent by itself. You have people with small holdings and growing different crops. Now when you look at it, there's a lot of data that can be processed in small language models in contextual terms and can be used to improve the outcomes for farmers. So that's, I think, the overall picture that I'd like to paint about how we are looking at it.
You spoke about, one thing about startups that they spend a significant amount of time just collecting data, which hopefully will solve with all the steps you spoke about. You are also involved in investing in startups apart from just supporting startups from an overall adoption point of view. So in your experience, what really distinguishes the few select good startups who are building and scaling versus others who are just running out?
No, I think at the end of the day, the ecosystem for ag startups and the startups in general is no different. We have to focus on unit economics, we have to focus on profitability, cash flow, and then we talk about revenue scale-up, which doesn't have to come on the top. Revenue scale-up without the profitability does not help anyone. Having said that, the tech startups, I believe, are disadvantaged in a lot of ways. So unlike the product that you develop for a SaaS or a consumer-facing product, app startups face the challenge of adoption, regulatory challenges, scalability, and lack of aggregated market information. So when you look at all of these things, like I mentioned a short while ago, most of the startups are spending all their time on collecting data, trying to develop a new product. If that information asymmetry was not there, you'll find startups looking at these opportunities to succeed. That said, the lack of funding is also coming because of the long gestational periods. So when we talk of AgTech startups, we should be careful that we don't equate it to a regular VC cycle. A regular VC cycle has a 10 to 12 year fund lifespan, and that may not necessarily serve this ecosystem very well. The way I personally look at it, when we look at AgTech investing, we need to start thinking about return of capital first. If the return of capital is done, then we talk about the cost of capital. That makes it sustainable at the very basic level. And if the impact is achieved, you start getting a return on your capital. So true impact has to come in this manner. Maybe institutions, and I have seen the World Bank issued a rhino bond a couple of years ago to support the conservation and the growth of rhinos in Africa, which had diminished, or which had decreased to about 5,500. There the investor returns are not tied to financial returns. They are tied to the success of the number of rhinos that are back in the ecosystem. And we need to start looking at something like this as we start thinking about how to support the AgTech ecosystem, to say the returns for investors, return for true impact investors, is going to be based on output rather than financial returns. And lastly, I think it's important that when we embark on something like this, where we at the World Bank are hoping to bring $9 billion to be invested annually, we're talking about taking 300 million farmers out of subsistence farming. There needs to be an essential component of blended finance. We need to bring together NGOs, EFIs, philanthropists, and say, can we together support, create a layer for supporting AgTech ecosystems? Thank you.
Doctor, coming back to the topic of inequality or equality, how do you ensure that the more rampant use of AI in agriculture actually improves the equality scenario and actually doesn't disadvantage the already disadvantaged rural and smallholder farmers?
Thank you. The question of inequality. I feel like the equality already exists in this dais because I'm surrounded by the rich organizations. FAO is not that kind of the rich organization. So I feel that I'm already feeling the pain of the inequality in terms of the money. Now, if you look at the, okay, let me ask one question. Who is the farmer in this venue? Who is the farmer? Okay, great. Great to see you, and thank you very much for understanding my Japanese English. Thank you very much. Look, thank you very much for the rest of the people to think about the farmers. You are the people who try to narrow the gap between the rich and the poor, or even the middle and the poor. Now, the inequality, even within the farmers, there's a lot of inequality. When you register farmers, majority of the farmers are men, and the women are not captured as a farmer. How are we going to ensure that this fantastic system we have in AgriStack, for example, how we consider, register, or recognize the women's farmer as the part of the farmers officially? And that's the one area that I really highlight. And by the way, this is the year of women this year. So I would like to emphasize the importance of women farmers. When I go to the rural area, I encounter so many women farmers. So this is the one area that I really think about inequality, how we bring the more women farmers, recognize women farmers. That's one. The second one is, if you go to the rural area, the many, the combined with the agriculture and also the livestock, they are practicing both most of the time. And then, if you shift a little bit in the eyes, then you encounter the farmers, all of the people who are landless. And they are usually raising the goats or sheep or small livestock. Often the case, these farmers are not recognized. And we need to narrow the gap of those people. But if we do not recognize the farmer, how are we going to involve them as part of the fantastic platform we have in the agri-staff, for example? And so then we move on to our eyes toward the ocean or inland aquaculture area. There's many of the fishermen. Often the case, they are the very vulnerable people, and if they don't have the resources of boats, they are often the case that they are left behind. So how are we going to help them using AI? Still, I haven't seen much of the AI solution to the fishers. So these are the areas where the FAO would like to work with the government of India to improve the narrowing the gap of inequality.
Thanks for that. Mark was speaking on the lack of gender diversity in this group. Too many men kind of sitting and talking, so to say. So we definitely need to look at that as well. But thanks for those points. Shaji, you spoke about the AI being a tool to reduce risk, and that's obviously a major application of AI. How do you see things fundamentally change from a lending point of view, from a risk point of view? How is AI changing business?
So we talked about how data is helping appropriate decisions, and there was a mention regarding agri-tech, where they need a lot of support rather than other types of tech applications in any other sector. They are having ready-made platforms to build on. So now for AI to fundamentally change the lending ecosystem, I think first of all things that we have to make the invisible persons visible, because most of the farmers documented, I mentioned about that, undocumented farmers and all. For that, we need to have a visibility of those who are actually doing farming. Right now, most of these transactions which they undertake, the relationships they maintain are all not in a digitized or in a verified. So that way, as a foundational aspect, we need to make those invisible persons visible. For that purpose, we need to have many this interoperability of their activities and also digital public infrastructure. Here, the fundamental aspect is that whatever data we are going to create, it should not become a monopoly. It should be freely available, so that the AI models and whoever is wanting to work. This is not just a money-making activity. In that case, already the farmers are subject to a lot of exploitations. So we should not actually, as AI develops, we need to prevent exploitation in this. That is where the institutions like FAO or the World Bank, NABARD at the local scale. As far as we are concerned, India, there was a mention that it is a vast country with different languages, culture, crops. So that means we need to replicate the World Bank model or FAO model, at least in the 1/6, because India comprises 1/6 of the world population. So the scale at which we need to work is higher. That is one thing. Second thing is that there was a mention that they are not that rich, but they are rich in experience. I think we need to take those experiences elsewhere, because India is having all the problems. In any part of the world, any problem is there, India is also having the same problem in one or the other. So there, we need to create a lot of new credit products, because in the lending perspective, it is not the usual traditional way of lending we need to do, where there will be a collateral or there will be visibility of the actions, there will be the information asymmetry will be lesser. So in that case, we need to develop newer models. There need to be a paradigm shift in the way in which we develop those products. So here, we need to look at cash flow based rather than a collateral based model. Cash flow based models that needs a lot of data to come in, and then there need to be digitized interactions happening between the value chain players. For that to happen, the leakages in the cash, because if you escrow the cash, then we need to ensure that leakages are not happening, so that the lender will have sufficient trust in those financing models. So in that context, the digitization and AI models will help us. And the other aspect, of course, the risk which in other sectors it may not be that accentuated is the climate risk, which I alluded to in the previous thing. And then there need to be more models like pay as you use type of models for equipment finance, for that to happen, and then value chain. So in India, the most important problem is that we are producing enough and more for our country, but then almost 40% of that, because of the improper handling and lack of processing infrastructure, lack of proper value chains, and then for value chain to settle, there need to be credit products around value chains rather than activity-based or individualistic-based lending models. So for that, I think AI has a very important role to play. And then it is very remote, a lot of challenges are there, so cost of operations are very high. So then we need to have a credit product which is less costlier to make that reach the farmer. That is another important thing. And then so from the paradigm shift which I was talking about, which was traditional lending is collateral based, and then there will be some sort of intelligence available, and as a result of this, the information asymmetry or the cost of accessing data will be lesser. So we need to actually make that change using AI models, where we need to have behavior and cash flow data as the base, not collateral as the base. And then on that, we need to build predictive intelligence. And from there, because of these aspects, uncertainty will be reduced. And then that uncertainty which will be transformed into lesser costs because of risk-based pricing models, which many of the institutions will be resorting to. So lesser efforts to access the data means lesser cost. And that, traditional financing models we have seen, it has led to a lot of exclusions, because only those who are make aware that they exist and they make aware that they are trustworthy, they are getting financial services. But then with the AI models to come in, inclusion will be increased. So in that context, NABARD, I'll mention about few aspects which NABARD is trying to do, where the digital public infrastructure, because we are a government entity, so we can afford to stay invested long. So that we are a patient capital provider. There was a mention that agri credit or the startup cycle is traditionally 10 to 12 years. We need to elongate that to at least 20 years. For that, a capital provider who is very patient and impact creating, or rather he's not looking for return, financial returns alone, he's looking for a blended return. So there are technologies like general partner and limited partner in the startup ecosystem. We need to add as a DFI a patient capital provider. So that aspect we are playing, and in that context, the EPIs which we are building based on the cooperative interventions which we are having, the agri-stack along with the Government of India, we are also working with them. On that, we are adding a rural credit layer, which is a RIN portal. RIN in Hindi is credit. So Kisan RIN portal, we are helping develop that, so that the traditional lending institutions, they may do some innovations in other types of credit products, but not in agriculture credit products, because return and risks are higher. So in that case, the risk, because of the risk and then the effort needed to when those products are higher, so they may not innovate enough in the credit models. So we need to have a government-owned or a quasi-government-owned loan origination systems for that. So we build that, and which will be institution agnostic, and any institution, even in a private institution or a non-banking financial company, which requires such platforms to build their credit products, we are open to that, and we will be the platform provider for that. And apart from that, we will be the institutional strength there also, because rural institutions are typically weak. So with all these implications of data and the AI tools and the aggregation orchestration roles which we are playing, what I want is that there need to be a paradigm shift of not collateral based but then cash flow based, behavior based credit, with which less depends on collateral but more depends on transactions, and which in turn will lead to higher inclusion and lower cost of farmer. And then the value chains also need to be fixed properly, else whatever we produce and the realization of that value to the farmer through these interventions, I feel that for a higher share of farmer should be there on the consumer price, and that way more inclusion and more welfare will remain in the farmer. So I see AI not as just this as a tool, but I see AI as an impact creating, welfare increasing for the whole country.
Thank you. I'm going to take a bit of a side topic. There is a mention in the Indian epic Mahabharata that whatever is here cannot be found elsewhere, and whatever is out there is definitely here in Mahabharata. So to your point about the Indian agriculture having some relevance for the world, anything happening around the world in agriculture having some relevance for India is just a beautiful analogy. So thanks for that. Mark, you spent a lot of time talking about the mix of capital, patient capital, and we spoke about VC model. Curious to know again, bringing the world knowledge and the global best practices, what kind of blended capital examples have you seen which really help scale technologies, especially AI in agriculture?
Good question. I want to address two things before I get to the examples. Some of it's already been mentioned, and I think bears repeating. So the first thing, we have to be very, very clear. Like any product, anything AI-driven has to be of value to the farmers. And a lot of times, we've done work at EFAD and in other organizations where we think an idea looks really great, and it does. It looks on paper. The IRRs look good, you can finance everything, but for some reason it doesn't take off. And there's multiplicity of reasons why not. And that's the market intelligence that we need to talk about. So without good market intelligence, an AI-driven product is just the same as any other product, bound to fail. And as our friend from the World Bank pointed out, because their drivers internally are quite different, data being the big one, but energy and knowledge, and hardly anybody knows how to do this really in the world, the structures are different. So moving them ahead faster and responsibly is a bit more of a challenge from a financing perspective. But I'd like to say that there's two things. There's financial and non-financial drivers that really support the growth of any business, AI-driven businesses in particular. And on the non-financial side, it's very important. We've talked about what we call the first layer, which is digital public infrastructure. And this is fundamentally important to get those costs down for the data collection, for one thing, but the aggregation. So I think India has made the right strategic choice by investing early and quite decisively in shared systems like AgriStack. Trusted farmer registries, consent-based data access, interoperability standards, and open API dramatically lowers the costs for the companies that are going into new business. It gives them the same rails to walk on, so that they can move forward without having to develop all this stuff. The other thing that's vitally important, both at the moment and in the future even more, is the governance and maintenance of that kind of platform. This is fundamentally important. What do investors love the most? Well, we know from the context we're currently sitting in, stability, predictability. These things are very vitally important. Now, the second non-financial intervention that you can consider is things like EFAD does, but other institutions, including FAO and others do. It's the business development services, it's the enterprise skill production services at the ground level in the rural areas. This is de-risking. This is fundamental de-risking. This is where the risks hit the ground, literally. And one of the things that we focus on a lot in the programs that we finance is helping with financial literacy, business literacy, particularly for those that were disadvantaged, so tribal communities, youth, and women. And I noticed, I walked outside there, of the 22 stalls, I saw 4 women behind the counters. I mean, that's like excluding 50% of your market. And one thing I do know this, is if you go into a community And you talk to the male farmers about what they produce, and they say, well, what do you like the most? They invariably go for the one with the biggest margin. Doesn't matter how hard it is to develop. But if you go and ask the woman, you have to take them aside, they'll say, what's the easiest and most profitable balance? Right? They're not always going to go for the tomatoes. They might go for mace because it's easier to produce. It gives them more time for family and whatnot. And this is important because 60% of smallholder farmers are women. Right? And we need to be able to talk to them to have a product that will actually work. Now, I'm just going to give a couple of examples of the question you actually asked me. So, you know, when I'm talking about the product life cycle curve, you know, there is this kind of a structure there. And I mentioned the challenge fund, which we really like. So a challenge fund takes matching money, some grant money and some equity from the companies that are being, are being supported, and then usually commercial bank finance as well. So you get three different kinds of financing there. That's a perfect example of blended finance. The matching usually comes in at about 30 to 50%, depending on what you're financing. And this is a really good way to de-risk, and it's a really good way to get catalytic capital into a company. We've seen it work for large companies as much as for small companies. Why? Because companies have internal opportunity costs of capital, and they're going to invest where they get the biggest return. Literally, they will always almost do that. And so this is a great way to bring down the risk of not investing in something else internally. Another great one that we like, that we've used in a couple of cases, is you simply write a first loss contract. Very simple. I know that IFC does this in a lot of places, and what you do there is you just get a bigger company or a smaller company, it doesn't matter, and you just write the contract so you take the first loss on a bank loan particularly, and that gets you into the banking system. And what we see with inclusive finance is a great model, is like purposefully trying to leverage the financial institutions into the conventional financial system. And I would just like to end by saying, you know, if you want to look at some really great, and it's not just because Shaji is sitting beside me, but if you want to look at some really great blended finance models, then you take a look at some of the things that NetBart is doing, but also IFC, and some of the non-financial things that FAO does, both at the production level and at other levels. And what we do, obviously, at the International Fund for Agricultural Development is working in a more holistic ecosystem so that the farmers are empowered. And I'll just end on that, is that in most smallholder communities, the barriers are enormous, and that leaves people feeling disempowered. The more you can make people feel empowered, it's intangible social return on investment, the more they will see opportunity and see hope. And this is fundamental for a country, any country, including India, particularly with the plans of becoming a middle-income country by 2047. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. If I were to just take the gist of what my esteemed co-panelists spoke about and reflect on what the AI and agriculture policy in Maharashtra already kind of covers, I see a lot of things already in place. There is a lot of thought which has gone into the data governance behind whatever information is coming. Interoperability is something we spoke about. That's the whole idea behind AgX as a platform which will allow people to access and use information with the right controls and consent and so on and so forth. We spoke about challenge funds. That's part of the whole scheme. We're evaluating technologies and startups. And in fact, the scheme is open to anybody. Foundations have applied saying that look, we have a good technology, we're going to go ahead and use it. It's not exclusive to startups. There has been a conversation about, okay, if the government funds a particular technology or a firm or a startup an amount X, can we have some kind of a joint activity coming, which is essentially blended finance is what we're talking about. So I'm glad that a lot of points we spoke about is already being conceived, and I look forward to very effective execution in the coming days from AIC. With that, I thank all the gentlemen of the podium for being patient and addressing the questions. Thank you so much.
That indeed was an immensely intriguing and engaging deliberation, and I'm sure all the audience members will agree with me. Let us have a resounding of claps for all the experts on the rails. And I request you gentlemen kindly step forward and come together for a group picture, which will stay with us for times to come. So we are at 1:05 now. We have managed to make up a little time. So we can afford a good 50-minute break, expecting you to be back in your